Hello, I am Lanny Guo, and my research project is on how rewilding of megafauna and other large animals can help mitigate wildfires. According to the National Interagency Fire Center's yearly report, in the 2024 wildfire season, nearly 9 million acres were burned by over 64,000 individual wildfires in the U.S., with over 4,000 buildings destroyed. As wildfires have become more frequent and intense in nearly every part of the globe, new ways to manage these fires and mitigate the billions of dollars of damage they cause need to be found. Many currently practiced methods of fire suppression and mitigation have serious flaws and can often be harmful to ecosystems, and in the end are not even all that effective at suppressing fires. A more notable example of one of these methods is full fire suppression, which, as Timothy Egan explains in his book, The Big Burn, was the primary method of fire prevention for most of the 20th century. It is effective at suppressing fires for a time, but it is harmful to many ecosystems that naturally burn at regular intervals. When a fire inevitably starts, the buildup of undergrowth and dead plants caused by the aforementioned lack of fires causes the fire to be fast-spreading and deadly. Rewilding is something that could solve the issue of environmentally unfriendly fire prevention methods. It can prevent fires, benefit local ecosystems greatly, and even benefit economically enriched local communities in the process. The reason I chose this topic for my capstone is a mix of things, but it is primarily because of where I am from. I am from Northern California, specifically the Klamath Mountains, about 4 hours north of San Francisco. The area experiences very regular, large wildfires, one of which was the 150,000-acre Carr Fire, which I myself evacuated for. Living in an area where I dealt with wildfires and their effects regularly made me really interested in finding better ways to manage these fires. As for my interest in rewilding, Northern California has been host to numerous annual reintroductions and rewilding projects, including pronghorn, elk, California condors, and specifically where I lived, river restoration projects, which included the removal of major dams and significant construction work and ecosystem restoration. My interest in this subject also peaked after I moved to Vermont. While the area is naturally quite beautiful, it lacks much of the wildlife and ecosystems it did in the past and has been host to only a few attempts to introduce lost wildlife and restore ecosystems. So I became interested in what could be restored in the region. Before we get into the meat of the project, an overview of wildfires and how they work will be helpful so we know exactly what it is we are trying to prevent. There are three main types of wildfires: surface fires, ground fires, and crown/ladder fires. Surface fires are fires that burn on the ground and in low-lying plant growth. These fires are easier to control and are how most environments naturally burn. Ground fires occur on or below the ground, often in peat, and can burn for weeks, months, or even years. Ladder fires happen when there's a lot of tall undergrowth around a tree, which acts as a ladder, allowing the fire to crawl up the tree, turning into a crown fire. Crown fires are near impossible to control, and they usually kill the trees they burn. Another type of fire is fire-induced weather, ranging from pyrocumulonimbus storms, also known as fire-induced thunderstorms, to full-on fire tornadoes, just as the one in the 2018 Carr Fire, which according to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, moved at upwards of 127 miles per hour and caused multiple deaths. Many of the large, fast-moving destructive fires that have happened in the recent years have been crown fires. This is largely because of the main fire prevention practice of the last 100 years, which is full fire suppression. This practice began being used after the 1910 Idaho and Montana wildfires, also known as the Big Burn, which burned over 3 million acres and killed 85 people, as described by Timothy Egan in his book. After this, the Forest Service and other agencies began suppressing all fires, even ones that were healthy for ecosystems. This led to tons of undergrowth and dead material building up in much of the forest in the United States, which is how wildfires in recent years have been able to spread so quickly. While wildfires are usually thought of as purely destructive and negative forces, they are often beneficial to an ecosystem. Many species here in northern New England rely on fire in some way or another. Jack pine requires heat from fires to spread their seeds, while black spruce is greatly helped by the heat as it helps them open up their cones. After fires, the dead trees produce a mineral substrate on which many mosses and lichens thrive. These mosses and lichens are essential for many species, as habitat for woodland mice and shrews and as food for woodland caribou, which roamed this region in great numbers until they went locally extinct in the late 19th century due to habitat loss and overhunting. As can be seen here from a tree core taken in central New Hampshire, the policy of in the U.S. suppressing all wildfires was in place from most of the 20th century, as can be seen from the lack of fires between 1911 and 1991. This led to almost no fires burning between 1910 and 1990s, as this shows. When the Constitution allowed in the 1990s, They started again when the concept of allowing some fires to burn for the health of the forest started to gain traction. This is a significant departure from the natural burn cycle, which had a stand-renewing fire burn through the area semi-regularly. So what is rewilding? The technical definition of rewilding, according to Trees for Life UK, is restoring a site or area to its natural state of trophic complexity and ecological function with wildlife and plant reintroduction and/or terrain manipulation to restore an ecosystem to a healthy natural state. This can come in numerous different forms depending on the environment and animals or plants being reintroduced. In a river restoration project, lots of work needs to be done to remove a lot of man-made structures a lot of the time, while little needs to be done in the reintroduction department. An example of this is the recent Klamath River restoration project done by the Yurok tribe in California, where after a dam was removed, much of the ecosystem restored itself for the most part. A totally different rewilding effort could come in the form of one involving a grassland ecosystem, such as the Great Plains. Often here, little work needs to be done on the environment directly, as reintroduced megafauna often will do the work themselves. But a lot of care has to be taken with the animals themselves to make sure they stay healthy and they don't end up somewhere they shouldn't be. A good example of this is prairie restoration in South Dakota, done by the World Wildlife Fund and local Native American tribes, where we introduce bison, elk, and bighorn sheep, often do the work of landscaping themselves, but their populations need to be carefully monitored to make sure they stay healthy, they stay stable and healthy. Here I mentioned a couple of examples of successful rewilding initiatives, but it can sometimes go wrong if it is not well thought out. An example of this is the two separate attempts by Maine, one in 1963 and another in 1986, to reintroduce boreal woodland caribou to the forest in northern Maine, as described by Dr. Mark McCullough of the Maine Fish and Wildlife Service. Both ended in failure, with both times the caribou either wandering back home or dying off. This project failed due to a lack of understanding of the habitat requirements for woodland caribou. This type of caribou primarily eats a type of lichen called reindeer lichen to survive the winter. This lichen almost exclusively grows in old-growth boreal forests, which had been logged out of existence in Maine by the early 20th century. Without their primary food source, the caribou struggled in the winter, either dying or migrating north into Canada. This illustrates one of the major reasons these projects sometimes fail, which is that the habitat animal needs no longer exists in an area where they once lived, and thus the area cannot support them. The presence of certain wildlife species has been shown to have a noticeable effect on how fires act in an area. Numerous recent studies done by University of California, Los Angeles researchers at Rancho La Brea have shown that after the extinction of megafauna like mammoths, ground sloths, and horses at the end of the last glacial maximum 10,000 years ago, led to an increase in charcoal in many areas, a sign of increased wildfires, and may have led to a change in habitats from woodland to grassland in areas like southern North America and Australia. In the modern day, many extant species have been shown to have noticeable impacts on the frequency and spread of wildfires. The presence of large herbivores in many places as a result of reintroduction efforts has been shown to decrease the overall plant biomass in an area, creating what the University of Tasmania referred to as herbivore lawns, thus leading to a decrease in wildfires due to less available fuel. Examples of this include the northwestern U.S., where the presence of elk in areas like Redwood, Olympic, and Yellowstone National Parks has been shown to reduce the amount of available wildfire fuel in an area considerably. And southern Africa, where the presence of large herbivores, such as white rhinos, has been shown to have a similar effect on fire-prone ecosystems. There is also anecdotal evidence that the dirt wallows and game trails large herbivores often leave behind can also act as small fire breaks, slowing the spread of wildfires. On a larger scale, large herbivores affect habitat heterogeneity, or in other words, the way different habitats are spread out within a given ecosystem. When large swaths of land consisting of only one habitat, a fire can have a far easier time spreading, especially if that habitat is especially fire-prone. The intermixing of fire-prone and fire-resistant habitats, which the presence of large herbivores encourages, can help prevent wildfires from spreading quickly. Other types of wildlife can have an effect on wildfire mitigation as well. In particular, what are known as ecosystem engineers. These are animals which manipulate the surrounding ecosystem to create their ideal habitat. An example of one of these is superb lyrebird of southeastern Australia, pictured in the top bit of B over there. An example which builds large mounds used as nesting sites. According to a study done by the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, at the 3 sites where they conducted the study, the creation of these mounds created large bare areas of earth where fires were less likely to burn. A notable success story involving the rewilding of animal and how it helped mitigate wildfires is the beaver. Beavers had previously been wiped out in almost all of North America and Europe as a result of overhunting for the European fur trade, and it existed in isolated populations in remote parts of North America and Russia. But beginning in the 1920s and 30s, they began to reintroduce to many parts of their former range, starting in the northeastern U.S. and Scandinavia. And now, thanks to this and restrictions on their hunting, they have spread back to much of their former range, albeit at only a very small fraction of their former population. Beavers are some of the most important animals when it comes to mitigating wildfires, and this is because of their role as ecosystem engineers. According to Emily Fairfax, a PhD scientist who is responsible for most of the research regarding beavers and their role in wildfires, beaver dams are some of the best natural fire breaks that there are. The backing up of the water as a result of dam construction forces groundwater to soak in the surrounding land, keeping the soil and plants above wet and preventing them from burning when wildfires burn through. Beaver ponds also support more fire-resistant habitats with riparian trees and brush, which are far less likely to burn in the first place. Beavers also help clean up the more fire-prone forests which surround their ponds by clearing out small trees and brush, i.e. fire fuel, for use as construction and food. This ecosystem service that beavers provide has led to an increased interest in reintroducing them to areas where they're absent, especially in areas that are highly prone to wildfires, such as the American Southwest and moorlands in the British Isles. But increasing the beaver population will also be beneficial in areas not traditionally thought of as prone to fires, such as New England. First off, the presence of beavers can prevent fires from happening in the first place, stopping the problem before it is even a problem. They can also be helpful during periods of drought, which have been more and more common in New England in recent years. And according to John Neely of the New Hampshire Department of Cultural and Natural Resources, are leading to increasingly high fire risk and occurrence in the region. There are other benefits to the presence of beavers, too. While beaver dams can cause minor flooding quite regularly, they often prevent larger flooding events from being devastating. They're also hugely beneficial to local ecosystems as they provide crucial habitat for many local species, such as river ducks, salamanders, and moose. So, for the research process for this project was relatively straightforward. While this is not a highly studied subject area, the sources that were available were thorough and reputable, coming from places such as the Royal Society, the United Kingdom Center for Scientific Advancement, multiple nonprofits such as Rewilding Europe and the World Wildlife Fund, and numerous books such as Eager by Ben Goldfarb. The main gap in research was that many regions had little to no research done in them in regards to rewilding as a form of wildfire prevention. One of the hardest areas to research was New England, as wildfire is typically not considered a risk here, and major reintroduction efforts are few and far between. Now, sources were not non-existent. I spoke with local scientists such as John Neely of the New Hampshire Department of Cultural and Natural Resources, and found a documentary, Borealis, which discussed how wildfires affect northern boreal forests, which make up a sizable portion of the Great Northern Forest in New England. However, it did take some effort, as almost no sources spoke directly about New England, so I often had to infer general facts based on similar environments and situations. What I want primarily to come out of this presentation is a spreading of general awareness of this subject, as it is not often often talked about and heavily relies on public support to be successful. But I have worked on creating an informational brochure on one important aspect of the project, that being the importance of beavers. It talks about why beavers are important and why people with property that has beavers on or near them should encourage their presence rather than try to get rid of them. I'm intending to distribute it via a local organization such as the Audubon Society or a similar organization. In conclusion, rewilding to help fight wildfire can come in many different forms, can be applied to many different situations and needs, and has the potential to be an invaluable asset when it comes to mitigating wildfires if done correctly. It has been achieved in many places around the world already and may be one of our best available assets for fighting wildfires. And here are my sources, and thank you for listening. Sources are available upon request. The population is stable, but it is considerably lower than it used to be. It's about 1/8 of the previous population, but it is relatively stable. Well, there's multiple. I personally think gray wolves are suitable for New England, and in certain parts, some sort of elk, probably Manitoban, especially in like southern Vermont and New Hampshire. I didn't notice much difference. Most of New England is part of one ecological region called the Great Northern Forest. So apart from slight differences in tree species and things like that, they're pretty much the same. I found a bit on that, specifically in reference to wolves, because most studies done have shown that wolves could easily repopulate Vermont, but their main issue is that they aren't protected here, unlike they are in Canada. So often, like a wolf from the Algonquin area will travel down here, but they almost immediately get trapped or shot, as someone thinking they're coyotes. And there's also some issue, not totally the same thing, but with moose here, that if the tick problem they have gets too bad, they may just go north into Canada and leave. Not much here, but in a lot of other places I've seen it. Like in California where I'm from, there was a ton of it. Just recently they did a big elk project down in the Sierra foothills, but I haven't heard much here. I think a little bit towards the Massachusetts Bay Area in regards to waterfowl, I think, but overall not a ton.